as well as those who are living with diabetes. So if you cannot hear me for any reason, please let me know by messaging in the chat box, but I think everyone can hear me, so we're good to go. So a little bit about myself. I am a dietitian and certified diabetes educator, and I actually work at LMC Diabetes and Endocrinology. I'm one of the educators there, and LMC Diabetes and Endocrinology is Canada's largest specialist group in diabetes and endocrinology. We have over 35 endocrinologists and 25 diabetes educators, and we have 9 centers across Canada. 7 are located in the GTA, and then we have an office in Montreal and an office in Calgary. So we see over 56,000 patients across Canada for diabetes management and other endocrine issues. So there's 7 in the GTA. The location that I work at is in Thornhill, which is just a few minutes away from the Joffrey Islamic Center. So very close. So if you do have any questions with your diabetes or do want to see an endocrinologist, I encourage you to find out more about LMC. And while you're there as a patient with one of our endocrinologists, everything is covered, publicly funded, to attend our nutrition classes and to meet with a diabetes educator. So now to begin the presentation. So the objectives of this presentation is that I'm going to give you an overview of diabetes to understand what exactly that is. We're also going to go under the complications for those who have type 2 diabetes. We're also going to learn the importance of blood sugar testing. And then specifically with management of diabetes, we're going to focus on diet and nutrition, as well as exercise and blood sugar testing. So just to begin, what is diabetes exactly, right? So diabetes is a condition where your body does not produce or use the insulin properly in your body to take the sugars from your blood into your cells. So as a result of that, you have high blood sugars. So I will just demonstrate that quickly in the next few slides. So in a person who doesn't have diabetes, they have insulin. And insulin is a hormone which is made in the pancreas. And it's secreted in response to carbohydrate digestion. So every time we have anything that has carbohydrate in it, insulin is produced. So insulin acts like a key. It allows the sugar to enter into the body's cells to create energy. So we know that we need carbohydrates. It's a source of energy for our body to move and to function properly. But insulin is needed to take that sugar from the food that's in our body and put it into our cells so our body can actually function properly. So someone who has diabetes, the process of insulin opening up the cells to allow the sugar to come in is not working properly. So as a result of that, the sugar is not going anywhere. It's not going into the cells, and it's just floating in the blood, okay? So this is what makes your blood sticky, essentially. It's like a very honey-like consistency, and this is incredibly dangerous. So there's a few types of diabetes. The main ones I'm going to just highlight is type 1 diabetes, okay? Now, a lot of people get confused of the difference between the two, so I'm just going to explain it very quickly here. So type 1 diabetes occurs in approximately 10% of people with diabetes. It's formally known as juvenile diabetes, and the reason for this is that it's usually diagnosed at a very young age, usually under the age of 30. However, in recent years, we have seen people in their 50s being diagnosed with type 1. So type 1 is an autoimmune disorder. This means that the pancreas is just not producing any insulin at all. So it's an autoimmune disorder, and people are put on insulin therapy right away because that's exactly what your body needs. So we can see over here in the diagram that the stomach changes food into glucose, and glucose enters in the bloodstream, right? And this is where we need insulin to take those sugars out to put it into our cells. So we can see where number 3 is, that's the pancreas, right? So there's very little insulin or no insulin produced. So as a result, you just need insulin therapy right away. Okay, so that's type 1 diabetes. Now, type 2 diabetes is a very different disease. And this occurs in approximately 90% of people with diabetes. And it's known as adult onset. However, we are seeing a lot of younger people being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So the management for type 2 diabetes, so someone who's diagnosed with type 2 are not typically put on insulin right away. They're usually put on oral medications, which I will talk about in a little bit. But healthy eating, exercise, medication, or insulin injections are some ways to manage it. And type 2 diabetes is a progressive disease. So this is very important to know that once you have diabetes, it just progresses further, so really having good proper management of it will help kind of manage your diabetes. But over time, the diabetes progresses. So this is what we're going to learn a little bit more about. So again, we see here that the food enters into our stomach, it changes into glucose, and we see number 3, where that's the pancreas that produces insulin. Again, there's not that much insulin there. So that's why we need medication and need to really watch what we're eating and to exercise. Okay, so what are some of the risk factors for type 2 diabetes? So in this presentation, I'm primarily going to be focusing on type 2 and prediabetes. So age. The older we get, our body's not going to be working as efficiently, and therefore we're at a higher risk for developing type 2 diabetes. So being over the age of 40, this is when our body, slows down, it's not working at its peak. And so just the older we get, we're at a higher risk. So being overweight, this is a really big factor. And especially if we carry a lot of our weight in the midsection, that's where all our organs are. Our pancreas, our heart, everything is, our liver, everything is in that area. So if we have a lot of fat, the organs are not working as efficiently, or they have to work very hard. So, being at a healthy weight is your best protection to prevent any chronic disease. So again, having an apple-shaped body, so you carry your weight in your abdomen as opposed to a pear shape where your weight is carried in the lower half of your body in your hips and thighs. So that's a bit better in terms of disease management because your organs are not being compromised. Family history, this is a very strong risk factor as well. So if we have a family history of one of your parents, especially if your mom has diabetes, you're at a higher risk for developing that. So that's a very strong risk factor as well. And if you had gestational diabetes or had a baby greater than 9 pounds, that also puts you at a greater risk. And interestingly, there are certain ethnic groups that put certain people at a higher risk. So those from African, Asian, South Asian, and Aboriginal descent, these people are at a higher kind of a stage 2 developing diabetes. And it's really interesting being, South Asian, and a lot of everyone who's listening here, I think, are South Asian. I had recently attended this amazing lecture by one of our endocrinologists who's also South Asian, and he was kind of looking into why South Asians are at a high risk, because they tend to be leaner, they're not very big people. And a lot of research that he found suggested that Asians carry a lot of their weight, even though they're smaller people, but their weight distribution is, a lot of their weight is concentrated in the abdomen. So that's, again, having an apple-shaped body, that puts you at a higher risk. Also, he found that South Asians, the amount of insulin that's produced in their pancreas is actually not as high as some other ethnic groups, like being Caucasian, for example. So we don't start off with a very high amount of insulin to begin with. So because the pancreas doesn't have enough insulin and South Asians carry a lot of their weight in the abdomen, that puts us at a very high risk. And again, if we look at the South Asian diet, that doesn't help us either, right? So this is what I'm going to be going on to in the next few slides, but I just wanted to highlight that being South Asian just puts us at a very high risk of developing diabetes. Okay, so the overview of some of the symptoms that you may experience with diabetes. So diabetes can happen without any symptoms at all. It's a silent disease, right? We probably don't even realize some of these things. So fatigue, that's a very common factor for so many people. Increased thirst. The reason why this happens is that your body has so much sugar in it that you need water to dilute that. So increased thirst, and again, that leads to increased urination. And you may have unexplained weight loss. So because you're having a lot of sugar in your body, your metabolism is not working as efficiently. So, the cells are not getting the energy it needs, and that could result in unexplained weight loss. And you could also have blurred vision. It's a very scary symptom. And again, this has to do with the blood not circulating properly. And in our eyes, we have very small blood vessels. So if blood is not being circulated properly, the blood is not going to pass through. So you result in blurred vision. And some people actually do get diagnosed when they get their eyes checked. So these are some common symptoms. But again, sometimes we don't have any symptoms either. So how does someone get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes? Well, you usually get a blood test. So this is when you have a fasting blood sugar of greater than 7. Okay? And usually when you go get your blood work done, you're in your blood panel, this is something that they do check for. In addition, you can also have a random blood sugar checked. And if your random blood sugar is greater than 11.1, then that's an indication that, you do have type 2. Another very common one is having the A1c checked. So the A1c measures your blood cells, your red blood cells, to see how much sugar, how sticky it is. So how much sugar is stuck to the red blood cell. So that's a very good indicator to find out where you are. So getting your A1c checked is probably the best way to kind of determine if you have diabetes. Typically, if you get a random blood sugar checked and if it's greater than 11.1, then the doctor will order an A1c. And this one you don't need to fast for it. And it just checks, the red blood cell has a lifespan of 3 months. So it just checks your red blood cells to see how much sugar is stuck onto that red blood cell. And anything greater than 6.5% is indicative that you have type 2 diabetes. Or you can do an oral glucose test, the 75-gram a sugar test. And again, after 2 hours, if your blood sugars are elevated, again, greater than 11.1, then that's another indication for type 2. So what about pre-diabetes? So pre-diabetes is also very important. Usually, if you are really, you get your blood work done annually, this is a really great way to flag yourself to see, where you are. So if you have a fasting glucose anywhere between 6.1 to 6.9, your doctor may be like, okay, you know what? You're at kind of a pre-diabetes stage, so this is where you can really take some lifestyle changes to get those sugars down. Again, the oral glucose test after 2 hours, if your blood sugar is in the range between 7 and 11, that's another indication of pre-diabetes. And also having your A1c. If it ranges between 6 to 6.4, that's also another way to test if you are in that pre-diabetes phase. Okay, so your A1c level and your incidence of developing diabetes. So if you have an A1c that is below 5.5, the chances of you developing diabetes in 5 years is very low, right? So again, 5.5 to 6. The chance of developing diabetes is between 9 and 25%, and this is where 6.0 to 6.5. So this is in the pre-diabetes range. So your chance of developing diabetes in 5 years increases to 25 to 50%. So it's very significant. And some people, they don't even get to this phase of pre-diabetes. They're just automatically diagnosed with type 2. So if you are in this pre-diabetes stage, you have so much control of what you can do with your lifestyle to help prevent you from developing diabetes, Okay, so some of the diabetes complications. So like I mentioned before, diabetes is a progressive disease, right? So if it's not controlled properly, it can progress further. So prolonged high blood sugars can affect pretty much all your organs. This is what makes diabetes so severe and so complex. Again, it can affect your eyes, so you can lead to retinopathy. This is when your blood is not being circulated in your eye vessels, right? Because again, the sugar is so thick in our bloodstream, it has a honey-like consistency. So first of all, it's going to slow down in terms of how fast the blood is flowing. So it's going to have reduced blood flow, and it's not going to be circulating properly. And our hearts, our cardiovascular system, that's at a huge compromise when we have prolonged blood sugars because our body's not, efficiently getting blood circulation. Kidneys, so nephropathy. So the kidneys are a very important organ because it filters your blood. So when you have too much sugar in it, you're putting your kidneys at such a stress. It's getting really stressed out with all the sugar, and that could lead to kidney complications. Same with your nervous system, neuropathy. So anytime you have tingling in your hands and feet, that's one of the early stages of neuropathy. But if you have diabetes, getting that checked out, making sure your blood is circulating, that's very important. And if you don't take care of your hands and your feet, then it could lead to neuropathy. And also sexual organs. So erectile dysfunction is very, very common with men who have uncontrolled diabetes. So again, this all has to do with your blood flow. And when your blood flow is compromised, it's going to affect every single organ in your body. So the best way to reduce complications is with good glycemic control. So that means good blood sugar control, okay? So again, taking your medications, changing your diet, and incorporating exercise are things that are going to help you prevent these complications. Okay, so I know I'm going to just mention a little bit about medications. For those of you who have prediabetes or are living with type 2, typically the first medication that's given is called metformin. So metformin is pretty much the gold standard of diabetes medication. It's been well researched and it's a very useful drug. So, like I said, when it comes to diabetes, the insulin is the organ that primarily makes the insulin, right, that you need. But when you have high blood sugars and the medication, they work on different organs of the body. So the liver, so if we look at hepatic glucose output, so the liver automatically just sends extra sends extra sugar as coverage during the night. So metformin works on the liver, so it reduces the amount of glucose that it produces. Okay, so that's what metformin works on. It works on the liver. Then you've got medications that works on our muscles. So the THCs, same with metformin, it also works on glucose uptake and utilization. So that helps with glucose entering your muscles. And then we got our glucose secretion medications that works on the pancreas itself. We have medications that works on the GI system, as well as, controlling our gut hormones. So that works with reducing our appetite. Then we've got a new class of medications, it's called the SGLT2s, which works on the kidneys. So there's different medications that work on different organs. And typically, your doctor will put you on 3 oral medications before advancing to insulin. So, I just wanted to highlight this. I'm sorry if it's too much information, but I just wanted to show that when you have high blood sugars and your doctor puts you on medication, it's important to know where that medication is working on your body. And they're going to use a combination. So one that works on the liver, one that works on your GI tract, maybe perhaps one that works on your kidneys. So it's different organs that the sugar actually works at. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And some people, when they have to progress to insulin, and I get this a lot, they just feel like this is the end. They're like, okay, I'm on insulin. This is all I can do now. And that's not true. Insulin is just giving your body exactly what it needs. Your body doesn't have enough insulin and you're just giving that to it. And sometimes that could be even better than having these oral medications because there's a lot of side effects. For metformin, for example, there's a lot of GI upsets that people have to deal with. So when you have insulin, the only side effect is having a low blood sugar. So it's a very fine balance of kind of finding out what works in terms of your medication. So typically someone's on 3 oral medications before they advance to insulin. However, if there are certain organs in your body, like your kidneys, if they're not, functioning properly, or if you're not tolerating medications properly, then you could be put on insulin sooner. And that's absolutely okay as well. So back to preventing complications. So one thing I want you to remember are the A, B, C, D, and E's. And what this means is your A is your A1c, right? So this is the blood sugar test that's done every 3 months, and you want your number to be below 7%. That shows that you have very good blood sugar control. Okay, that means your diabetes is well controlled. Your blood pressure, very important. You want your blood pressure to be less than 130/80. Cholesterol, again, you want your LDL cholesterol, which is your, term bad cholesterol, you want it to be less than 2. And then D is drugs to protect the heart. So regardless of your blood pressure or your LDL cholesterol, your doctor, if you do get diagnosed with diabetes, may automatically put you on heart medications. And you might be so confused, like, why do I need to go on blood pressure and cholesterol medications when I don't even have that? But it's just a way to prevent any other complications. Because having diabetes puts you at such a greater risk for heart disease that they just want to protect the heart, regardless of the baseline blood pressure or LDL reading. Okay, so that's the reason why. Even though you don't have high cholesterol, you may be on a cholesterol medication. It's for that reason. It's just a protective measure. And again, so you could be on an ACE or an ARB, a statin, or an ASA if indicated. So E is for exercise and eating healthy. So I want you to remember that exercising and eating healthfully is just like medication. It's just as important. So regular physical activity, achieving and maintaining a healthy body weight, very powerful, okay, in terms of diabetes management. And then S is for smoking cessation. So anyone who is a smoker and gets diagnosed, highly encouraged to stop. It's always encouraged to stop smoking, but especially if you have diabetes. Okay, so now we're going to be talking a little bit about the management of diabetes, okay? So this is your blood sugar targets. So if you have pre-diabetes or diabetes, it's really good for you to be checking your blood sugars. This just tells you how you're doing, so you know for yourself. So the goals that you want is that your fasting or your pre-meal blood sugar should be between 4 and 7. That's the ideal range. And 2 hours after eating. So this is 2 hours after your first bite. You want your sugars to be in the range between 5 and 10. Now, if your A1c is greater than 7, it's not at the goal, then you have a tighter restriction. So it's between 5 and 8 millimoles. Okay, so just some goals that I want you to keep in mind in terms of your blood sugar targets. So we talked about, high blood sugars. So what happens when you have a low blood sugar? So a low blood sugar happens when you have a sugar reading of less than 4. And this can be really dangerous. You can result in shaking, sweating, being anxious, dizzy, hunger, your heart may be beating very fast, impaired vision, weakness, fatigue, headache, and just being irritable. So if you ever feel like this, it's really important that you check your blood sugars, because if you have a sugar less than 4, it's dangerous and you need to treat that right away. So how do you get a low blood sugar? So that could be maybe you had a lot of exercise that day, right? So your muscles are using up all that sugar that's floating in your blood. So that could result in a low blood sugar. And not eating on time, skipping meals, right? So eating less than normal, taking too much medication or insulin, and also the effects of drinking alcohol could cause a low blood sugar. So not eating on time, this is very important during Ramadan, when we're fasting, and there's a lot of people who have diabetes that fast, and it's absolutely okay to do so, but you just need to really remember that if you're not feeling well, if you don't feel good, it's very important that you check your blood sugars. And if it's less than 4, then you do need to break your fast and treat it. So how do you treat a low blood sugar? Well, you need to check your sugars right away. And if you need to have fast-acting carbs. So what is this? So fast-acting carbs are 3 glucose tablets, a half a cup of juice or regular pop. Or if you don't have that, then you want to take 3 sugar packets and dissolve it in water. Again, this is regular sugar, not sweetener. Or any kind of hard candy like Lifesavers, you want to chew them up. So it's really important that you don't want to have chocolate or, a donut, because they have fat in that, and fat will delay the absorption of the sugar. So you want fast-acting carbohydrate. So I recommend always having juice boxes in the house or in the car. So if you ever do have a low blood sugar, you have something quick and easy to resort to. Okay, so you want to wait 15 minutes and then check your blood sugar again. If your blood sugar is still below 4, you need to treat it again. Meal is more than an hour away. After you treat your blood sugars, you want to have a snack that consists of a protein and a carbohydrate. So an example is some crackers and cheese. Okay, so how often should you be testing your blood sugars? And managing your diabetes, or if you have prediabetes and you're just doing it with diet alone and lifestyle changes, it really depends. You don't necessarily have to check your sugars every day. You can check a few times a week just to see where you're at. So maybe one day you want to check your fasting, and another day you want to check 2 hours after dinner. So it's just kind of being smart with how you're testing your sugars and trying to find different times throughout the week to test it. So again, a few times a week is absolutely fine. If you are on insulin therapy, you should be checking every single time you inject your insulin. And you also want to check 2 hours after you eat, because it's really useful to see if the amount of insulin that you're taking is actually working. Okay? So smart testing, very important. Again, just picking and choosing the times to when to check your blood sugars, okay? So smart testing empowers you to analyze the values and not just record them. When the blood sugars are out of target, you want to ask your question, why? Why are my sugars out of target? And this could be a variety of reasons. It could be maybe you had too much carbs at your meal, or you just haven't been eating properly. And this helps you reach your A1c target. So remember, our A1c target is 7%. So factors that cause the high blood sugar could be increase in carbs or even stress. If you have a lot of stress in your life, you haven't been sleeping properly, if you're overcoming an illness, like a cold even, that can definitely throw your sugars out. Your body is just fighting something, and as a result, it's putting a stress on your body, and that can increase your blood sugars. So factors that decrease your blood sugars include medication as well as exercise. Okay, so now we're coming to the part of healthy eating, which is what I really enjoy talking about. So healthy eating or nutrition therapy can reduce your A1c by 1 to 2%. So just looking at this alone, it's very powerful, right? So if you have an A1c of 8 or 9, just by diet therapy alone, like changing the way you eat, you can reduce your A1c to target without any medication. Now, this requires a lot of dedication, but it can happen. So healthy eating. So when it comes to diabetes management, it's so important to know how to eat well. So, you need to learn when to eat, what to eat, and how much to eat. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, so when to eat. So ideally, if there's no such thing as a diabetes diet if you have diabetes. It's just healthy eating, essentially. There's no special diet for you or things you need to avoid completely. You just need to be smart and careful with how much you're eating. So you want to eat 3 times a day. You want to typically have 3 meals a day. You don't want to go longer than 6 hours between your meals, okay? What happens is if you go longer than 6 hours, your sugar levels could drop. And then when you do eat, it's gonna go up again. And that doesn't make you feel good when your sugars are constantly, low and then high. You want to have your sugars at a steady level throughout the day. That's the goal with diabetes management. And the way of doing that is to make sure you're eating consistently. So no more than 6 hours between your meals. If the gap is greater than 6 hours between your meals, this is when you would consider doing a healthy snack. So again, a healthy snack is a protein and a carbohydrate. So let's say if you typically have an apple as a snack, that's great. Again, apple, is a fruit. It does have sugars in it. So you want that protein element to pair it with the apple so the sugars don't go up. You kind of work together to keep the sugars balanced. So if you typically just have, a fruit in the morning, you want to pair it with a protein source. So some nuts are a great alternative, or some cheese. Okay, so what to eat, right, when you have diabetes? Well, these are our food groups. We have our grains and starches, we have our fruit, we have our milk alternatives, we have vegetables, we have fats and other choices. So not all these foods have carbohydrates, but some of them do, which is what we're going to be talking about. So carbohydrates in our body turns into sugar or glucose, and we need that. We absolutely need that because we need energy. And if we don't get enough carbohydrates, that's not good either. Our brain needs at least 130 grams of carbs a day alone to function well. So there's so many organs in our body that need the sugars to operate, to function well. So where do we get our carbohydrates from? So number one, our grains and starches. This is what people are very familiar with. So our rice, our legumes, our bread. pasta, chapati, and the two vegetables that are actually a carbohydrate are corn and potatoes, okay? So I want you to remember that. So our fruit juices, and our dried fruit, they all have a source of sugar as well. Our milk and yogurt dairy has natural sugars in it, so we need to be mindful to find out where our sugar is coming from. And our other choices, like our snack choices, such as baked goods, candy, pop, crackers, granola bars, those all have carbohydrates in them. So now that we're talking about all these foods and the different amount, the different types of carbs, so, is it fair to say that all are carbs considered equal? And the answer is no, it's not. So this is what comes with the glycemic index, and maybe you have heard of it before. I think I have talked about it before. So the glycemic index measures how quickly food turns into sugar in our body. Okay, so an example here in the red is white bread. So white bread turns into sugar very, very quickly in our body. Same with fruit juice. It's just a quick source of glucose. And low GI foods are digested more slowly, and the sugar is released in a gradual form. Remember I said that when the goal for diabetes management is to have steady sugars throughout the day? Well, this is what helps you in achieving steady blood sugars, is to have foods that are low glycemic index, that are digested much more slowly, and the sugars are released over a period of time as opposed to in a very concentrated amount. Okay, so low GI foods, so these are whole grains. This is why it's so important, and why you always hear, oh, you should be having whole grains, and why you should have, brown bread instead of white bread. It's because you have the grain, the actual grain is there, and your body needs to break that down. And the grain is made up of fiber, and fiber is slowly digested in our body. Again, with lentils and beans, same thing. Yes, they're a source of carbohydrate. However, because they have so much fiber in it, it's digested very slowly. So the types of carbs you're having are incredibly important. And there are so many studies that show that people who follow a low GI diet have better blood sugar control. So just choosing being smart with our carbohydrates is very important. So we don't need to follow a low carb diet at all. We just need to find foods that have a low glycemic index, that are digested more slowly. And foods that have a low GI are foods that have fiber in it and protein. So lentils, beans, whole grains, vegetables, fruit. So those are low GI foods. Okay, so high fiber foods tend to be lower in glycemic index. Okay. So what else should we be eating if we want to manage our blood sugars? Well, protein. So protein is very important. Foods that have protein do not have any carbohydrates. So you want to pair your foods properly. So remember when I said when you're having a snack, you want to have that carbohydrate, but you also want to pair with the protein. Protein doesn't have any sugars in it, and it's very important in our body. So it's used for building, maintaining, and repairing the body's tissues, such as our muscles, our organs, our skin, and our hair. So sources of protein come from animals, but they're also vegetarian protein sources as well. So our meats, our poultry, our fish, eggs, cheese. So even though I said milk and yogurt are a natural source of sugar, cheese actually has no carbohydrate in it. In that process, all the whey is removed, so you're left with a thick product, which is cheese, and it doesn't have any sugars. Same with nuts and seeds. They don't have any sugars in it. They're just a source of protein. So protein does not raise your blood sugars unless you're eating it in excess. So if you go out for dinner and you have a steak, like an 8-ounce or 12-ounce steak, okay, yes, it doesn't have carbohydrate in it, but because it's so much protein, it could lead to high blood sugars just because the portion is so much, okay? And I'm going to be talking about portions in a little bit. So that will explain that a little bit further, okay? So the point here is that protein doesn't have carbohydrates, and we want to include them every time we eat. Vegetables, okay? So the only two vegetables that I said you really need to be careful with are the corn and potatoes. Everything else is great. You can eat as much as you want. So vegetables add bulk, they're full of fiber, they have tons of vitamins and minerals, okay? So again, just the starchy vegetables, If you are having potato or corn, you want to keep that to half of a cup. That's a serving. So some people always ask about, carrots and peas and beets. Yes, those are sweeter vegetables, but you need to have about 2 cups of those to actually count as a carbohydrate. So it's very hard to eat 2 cups of carrots, right? So I don't want you to worry about that so much. The only 2 vegetables that you need to be mindful of are potato and corn. And fat. Right, fat is good. There's some good sources of fat and not so good sources of fat. So sources of fat in our diet come from oils, butter, margarine, avocado, bacon, or like the processed meats, olives, and nuts. Okay, so we want to be careful because even though fat does not have any carbohydrate, it is a very concentrated amount of calories. So we want to be smart in what fats we choose to eat in our diet. So again, fats do not raise our blood sugar, but excessive fat intake will lead to weight gain. And we learned earlier that being overweight or an unhealthy weight range really significantly increases our chances of developing type 2 diabetes. And again, being South Asian, the way our body is made up, we do naturally just carry a lot of weight in our midsection. So it's very important that you watch your fat sources. Okay, so fat, especially the total fat, the saturated fat, and trans fat will negatively affect your blood cholesterol levels. Okay, so not only do we have to worry about our sugars and weight gain, but saturated fat and trans fats will also affect our LDL cholesterol. So it's really important to try to choose healthy fat sources. So for example, avocado is excellent, nuts are good because they're full of monounsaturated fat, which are fats that are good for you. As opposed to like butter or margarine, which is the source of saturated fat. Okay. So we're going to just do some activity. Actually, no, the menu planning is in a little bit later on, but I just wanted to go over this activity with you right now before we do that. So when you are out, how do you know how much you should be eating? And so our hands are actually very useful in terms of kind of portioning out our food. So we talked about what we should be eating, when we should be eating, and now we're talking about a very important concept, is how much you should be eating. This is all about portion control. So just because you have diabetes does not mean you have to eliminate certain foods. You really have to control your portions. And this is for anyone who actually wants to lose weight, for weight management. It's how much you're eating. Okay? We said, obviously turns into sugar in our body right away. So we want to keep that to about a fist size, which is about a cup or a medium fruit. So that's what we want to keep our carbohydrate intake to at our meals. So you just look at your fist. Let's say if we're having rice, you want to keep it to that portion. Okay, so it's not a lot, but that's what the serving size is. So protein, how much protein should you be having? So about 3 ounces. Actually, it's about 3 to 5 ounces. So it depends on the size of your hand, but that's what you want to portion out. So when you do go to a restaurant and order steak, it's definitely not going to be the size of the palm of your hand at all. Otherwise, no one will go there. But you may want to eat half of it or share it with someone, right? So you're not eating the whole, 10 ounces or whatever they have there. So you want to have 3 ounces, about a portion, 3 to 5 ounces. And vegetables. So this is where we can go crazy. So we want to have 2 handfuls. So we want to have an amount of vegetables that we can fit in both our hands. Okay, so this is a really good way for you to kind of gauge how much what your meal should be looking like. So now let's put this all together. Yes, and our fat is the tip of the thumb. So if we're having, any kind of oil on our salad, sort of dressing, you want to kind of measure that portion, okay? So tip of your thumb. So now let's put this all together to see what our actual meal looks like. And when we put it all together, it doesn't look so bad, right? So we have a fistful of carbs. So this could be our bread, our rice, our pasta, 2 handfuls of vegetables, a palm of protein, and a thumb of added fat. Looks like something is cut off here. But anyway, this is what our plate should look like. So that translates to your plate being half vegetable. You want to aim for at least 2 kinds. And vegetable can be, it could be raw, it could be in a salad, it could be steamed, it could be roasted vegetables, it could even be a vegetable soup. So it's different ways you can get your vegetables in. It doesn't always have to be a salad. You want a quarter of it to be a grain or your starch. Remember that fistful of carb. And you want your other quarter of your plate to be a meat and alternative. So again, fish, lean meat, chicken, beans, or lentils. Okay? So that's what our meal should be looking like. So always vegetable is a star of your plate. It takes up half your plate, and then the rest is filled with your grains and your meat, or meat and alternatives, your protein source. So now when we look at the South Asian diet, there are some good things about it and there's some not so good things about it. So some of the good things about our South Asian diet, it's, we have a lot of lentils, a lot of beans to choose from, and we should really be eating a lot more of those. We have a lot of whole grains in our diet too, from roti, which is made from whole wheat flour, or foods that are made from chana flour. And we have a wide assortment of vegetables and herbs and spices too, right? Like a lot of flavor that we can get without adding a lot of extra stuff, like our cilantro, coriander, cumin, turmeric. These are all great elements of our diet that have been shown that really do help with our overall health. So we want to maximize that. So what makes the South Asian not so good? Again, it's high carb, right? So we have a lot of rice in our diet, a lot of white rice. Potatoes are very common in many of our curries, and naans as well. And so we want to be careful. It's it can be very high carb. And also high in fat. Many South Asian foods are fried, unfortunately, and using too much oil. So the combination of the high fat, high carb can be really dangerous. So not only is it going to send your blood sugars up, but because it's also high in fat, it's going to have like a prolonged effect. So the sugars are going to stay high for a while. So this is anything that's deep fried, that's carbohydrate. So a good example here is mandazi, right? So it's all made from white flour, and then it's also fried on top of it. So, it's not good to eat that very frequently. So just something to keep in mind. Something that's high carb and also deep fried or fried, you want to really, really be careful with. Even samosas, baking them, they're a great alternative. So you may want to try that. Again, you're just reducing the amount of fat by doing so. So this is an example of an unbalanced plate, okay? So again, we see it's very high carb, right? We have the roti, we have the white rice, that takes up half our plate. There's absolutely no vegetables to be seen here, and there's a lot of protein. So this meal is gonna send our blood sugars very high, and unfortunately, this is what a lot of our diets look like, right? So what can we do to change this? Okay, well, this is an example of a more balanced South Asian plate. So again, we have limited the rice. It's like half the amount. We've added a lot more vegetables, right? So we have okra here and some kind of salad, and reduce some of our protein. So not so much chicken, right? So this is a more balanced plate. So this really looks like that plate I showed you earlier, but half your plate you want it to be vegetable, a quarter of it a starch, and a quarter of protein. So this definitely looks like a more balanced plate, and I hope you guys all agree. So we look at the one before, a lot of rice, a lot of roti, a lot of meat, or chicken, sorry, as opposed to the more balanced plate. And this just looks just as filling. There's still the same amount of food on our plate, but it's just what we're putting on our plate that's really making a difference. Okay. So now we're going to be looking at menu planning to see, some of the foods that are typically eaten and how we can improve upon that. So for breakfast, maybe an example which I see a lot, especially in South Asians, is to have 2 slices of whole wheat toast, which is great. It is whole wheat. We have some butter with that, and we have tea with milk and 2 sugars. So just looking at this, you can see that there's no protein, right? There's absolutely no protein. So that sugar that we're getting from this breakfast, it's going to send our blood sugars really high. So what can we do to improve this? Well, maybe reduce the amount of bread that you're having to 1, and then have an omelet with that, like an egg, right? And if we make an omelet, we can add vegetables inside or some kind of spices to kind of really boost the flavor and increase the volume. So vegetables are always great to add because they do increase the volume and increases the fullness factor of that meal. So having an omelet with one slice of toast, so the protein will keep you full for a longer stretch of time because it takes longer for our body to digest protein. So that's why it's so important to make sure we have protein at every meal and snack for that matter. And then you can still have your tea, but perhaps try to reduce the amount of sugar to 1. This is a very small step, but it's very impactful. So if you reduce our sugars to 1, it really does make a difference. And it can take some time getting used to that, to reduce the amount of sugar you put in your tea, but you will get there eventually, I promise. Or you can use a sweetener. Now, sweeteners, I'm not a huge fan of, but if you're someone who typically likes to add a lot of sugar in your tea, then I would definitely recommend you going for a sweetener, especially for diabetes management. But if you can, stick to sugar, but just use a small amount, that would be better. Okay, let's look at lunch. So let's say we have a cheese sandwich with some chips and a can of soda. So again, we don't have any vegetables and the protein is low. Again, it's high sugar, high fat as well from the chips. So a very unbalanced type of meal. So what can we do to make this meal over and make it better for us? So in the cheese sandwich, maybe we can add some lettuce or tomatoes, right? Any kind of vegetable in the sandwich to help boost the amount of fiber we're getting. And like I said, fiber is very important when it comes to managing your blood sugars. Perhaps we can switch out some of the cheese. Again, cheese is a source of saturated fat. Even though it doesn't have carbohydrates, it does have a lot of saturated fat in it. So maybe we can swap that out for healthier fat. We can do avocado slices. That's very creamy, and it's a great replacement for cheese, filled with tons of nutrients, and it really has that creaminess, so it's very filling. Or you can add hummus as a spread and add some vegetables on that instead of a cheese sandwich. So again, you're getting healthy fat, you're getting fiber, and you're getting vitamins. And in place of chips, if you do feel like having something crunchy, you want to choose air-popped popcorn, okay? So again, this is the whole grain. This is not the microwave popcorn. Air-popped, you can get it at the grocery store. You can make it yourself on the stove. I know Costco sells Skinny Pop, which is great. It's a whole grain. There's protein, there's fiber, and it's a great alternative to chips. Or you can have a piece of fruit. And then you can swap the soda for diet soda, water, which is ideal, or unsweetened iced tea. So those are some suggestions you can make. So you can see like little tweaks that you can make to a regular lunch to really make it, satisfying. So you're still having a sandwich, but you're just giving your body so much more nutrition. And reducing the simple sugars in your diet. Okay, so now let's look at dinner. So let's say we have, rice and curry, right? So 2 cups of white rice, which is very common, and it's actually, we're so used to eating that much. 1 cup of meat curry, again, that has potatoes in it. We have 2 rotis as well, and some orange juice. So looking at this meal, again, the vegetables, it's missing. So we need to add that element in there. And it's very carb heavy, right? 2 cups of rice and 2 rotis, that's a lot. And again, with the orange juice. So what can we do to make this better? Well, we can decrease our portion of the rice to 1 cup. And ideally, if you can make that switch to brown basmati rice, that's even better. Again, it's a whole grain, so the fiber is really going to take longer to digest. And I don't know about you, but if you ever have like a cup of brown rice versus a cup of white rice, like you can really not eat that much brown rice because it's so filling. It's very heavy because of that fiber. It really fills you up. So if you don't like brown rice, you can even try quinoa, which is great. It's another alternative to white rice. Or you can just decrease the amount of rice you're having to 1 cup. And then you can add 1 cup of the curry, but don't take any of the potatoes. Okay, so you really want to eliminate the simple sugars. You can reduce also your roti to 1 instead of 2. And I didn't write this in here, but also adding the vegetable component. So maybe, some of our South Asian curries, it's really hard to incorporate like vegetables there, but you can even have a side of raw vegetables, like really pair really nicely with us South Asian meals. So having like some cucumber slices, some radishes, or any kind of vegetables on the side to kind of help balance this meal. Or you can do a vegetable curry as well. And then you want to swap the orange juice for water. or you can even try. There's no sugar in it, and you can add some orange slices in there as well for the flavor. Okay, so that's something you could try. And again, snacking, this is really important, especially if you're going longer than 6 hours of not eating. So typically between breakfast and lunch, I don't recommend a snack so much. Again, I just want you to be eating very healthful meals. So if you breakfast around 8, 9, you have lunch around 12, 1. But between lunch and dinner, that's a longer stretch. We typically have, dinner around between 6 and 8, right? So if you have lunch at around 1, that's a long stretch of time. So you want to really fuel yourself and, kind of prevent your blood sugars from dipping down too low. So a great snack, again, is one that has protein. So this would be really great to have fruit as our snack. And I highly encourage that, but you want to include a protein source with it. So again, fruit and cheese. If you can do yogurt and berries, that's another great suggestion for a snack, or an ounce of cheese with some crackers. Okay, so you always want to make sure you add that protein element into your snacks as well as your meals, because that's really going to help you keep your sugars steady. Okay, now talking about exercise. Okay, exercise is so important when it comes to blood sugar management. In terms of weight loss alone, if you are someone who's trying to lose weight, research has shown that 80% of your weight loss efforts should be focused on diet, and only 20% of it is on exercise. But there's so many benefits of exercise, right? So it improves your blood sugars, because if you think about it, in order to move, our body needs energy, right? So it picks up all that extra sugar that's floating in your blood, and it gets delivered into our muscles. So walking, any kind of exercise is going to be so helpful. So improve blood sugars. That's what exercise can do. It increases your insulin sensitivity. So the insulin's able to work better. It increases glucose uptake. So again, the sugars are being used by the muscles. It decreases your risk of heart disease. It increases your metabolism, which is definitely beneficial if you want to reduce your weight. It's important for bone strength, for weight loss or weight maintenance. Exercise helps with your sleep patterns, and it really improves your mood as well. So there's a host of benefits for physical activity, and this is something you should be including every single day, whether you have diabetes or not. But especially if you do have diabetes, you really want to make that time to get in your exercise, because it's very powerful. And you can even notice it yourself if you check your sugars, let's say after a meal, and then let's say you go on a 30-minute walk, and it's a brisk walk. You're not just walking leisurely. You want to actually be walking quite fast. And if you check your sugars after that, you'll notice a decrease. And that decrease can actually prolong for several hours. So it's very impactful, something that I really want you to keep in mind. Again, you want to be careful when you are exercising. You want to discuss any kind of routine that you're doing with your doctor. You want to measure your blood sugars pre and post activity. You may, if you're on insulin, you may need to reduce some of your medication, or perhaps even have a snack before you exercise. So if you have type 2 diabetes or on insulin, it's really important that you wear your medical alert bracelet and carry some ID with you. Make sure you're properly hydrated, and you want to really check your feet and make sure you're wearing proper supportive shoes, okay? So how much exercise should you be getting? Well, there's 3 types of exercise. There's your cardio, which works on your heart. So this includes walking, hiking, biking, or swimming. So the CDA, the Canadian Diabetes Association, recommends 150 minutes of exercise in a week. So if we break that down, that's about 30 minutes 5 times a week. It's not a lot, right? It's pretty reasonable. So that's what you want to aim for. You want to aim for 30 minutes at least 5 times a week. Sorry, I think it says 3 over there. It should be 5. And anything more than a walk should be discussed with your doctor if you have any other health complications. So strength training is also another type of exercise you should be getting in. And this really helps with your muscle, building your muscle, boosting your metabolism, and increasing your bone strength. So strength training is resistance training. So using weights, using your body weight, doing push-ups or squats. So you want to try to do at least twice a week. And this can even be done for 15 to 20 minutes, so not that very long. right? And then stretching. So we want to make sure we're getting our stretching component in to increase our flexibility. So you want to, engage in yoga or Pilates. So this does sound like a lot, and it's important to include all three into your lifestyle, but you really want to focus on getting 150 minutes a week of cardio in, okay, of brisk walking and just moving. The more we move, the better it is for our blood sugars. That's the takeaway. And lastly, I just wanted to finish off with the importance of self-management. So what is self-management, right? Self-management is taking the responsibility of your own health and well-being. So really being proactive about your health. So an educator's role, and this is your doctor, your dietitian, your diabetes educator, their role is to provide you with the tools, the skills, and support needed to improve your well-being. Okay, so we're here to kind of support you along the way and kind of give you the guidance to show you what you should be doing. And your role is to be really active in managing your diabetes so that you and your healthcare team can work together to set goals that will lead to better health. So it's a very it's a very collaborative effort between you and your educator to kind of work together to see what works for you. So does anyone have any questions? I'm pretty much finished the presentation. So if anyone has any questions they would like to talk about or for me to explain more into, I would be more than happy to do that right now. And again, at LMC, you can meet with a dietitian as well. Again, it's all covered under OHIP. So you can actually sit with an educator to figure out your diet and to where to make changes. So no questions? I hope everyone could hear me. Okay, so sorry, I have two questions here. So question number one, is coverage available when you have prediabetes as well? Yes, absolutely. You can definitely see an endocrinologist, which you can get referred to from your family doctor, and you can meet with an educator to help, because with prediabetes, that's all prevention, right? So there's so much you can do at this point. So if you have been diagnosed with prediabetes, I strongly encourage you to meet with an educator to see what you can do to prevent that from progressing further. So absolutely. And how do you prevent diabetes? So again, I'll pull up that slide again. So here are some of the risk factors. So there's a few risk factors that we have absolutely no control over, right? So our age. So being at a healthy weight, that's something we have control over. So reducing your weight and making sure your BMI, which is your body mass index, is at a healthy range. So under 25, so reducing your weight, even if you have been diagnosed with prediabetes or even if you have type 2 diabetes, if you lose 5 to 10% of your body weight, you can dramatically reduce your blood sugars. And you can even go off medications as well in certain situations. So reducing weight, being at a healthy weight are very, very powerful. And again, I mentioned that because a lot of our weight, if it's carried in our midsection, and if we reduce that stress, then our organs are able to work better, right? So, watching your weight, eating properly, and exercising, those are all prevention in terms of diabetes prevention. And how do you get a glucose meter? You can definitely get one at Shoppers Drug Mart, Walmart. They sell them at any kind of pharmacy, so you can test your blood sugars. If you, meet with an educator, like at LMC, I can actually give you one, and it's fine. You just have to get strips, which you do need a prescription for to get strips to test your blood sugars. So that's that. And I know people who sometimes have prediabetes, their doctor doesn't really encourage them to test, but you should get a prescription anyway for the strips just to see where you are, so you can kind of self-manage yourself before you progress to type 2, right? So I hope that answered the questions. So again, diabetes and a lot of other chronic disease like heart disease, those are all preventable, but it really has to do with changing your lifestyle. And I completely understand that changing your lifestyle is so hard. It's really hard if you've been, used to eating a certain way for so many years and now you have to change. It's not easy, but it can be done. And again, you don't need to give up certain foods. You just really need to watch how much of it you're eating. So the portion control is absolutely vital in terms of what you're eating. Portion control, making sure you're eating at the right times of the day as well. All right, well, yes, so very good question. I'm so glad you were able to ask this question. So is a portion size same for low GI foods as well? Absolutely. So just because you're having a whole grain bread doesn't mean you can have 3 slices, right? So any kind of bread has 15 grams of carbs. So this is when all carbs are not created equal. So a slice of whole wheat bread has 15 grams, which is a serving of carbohydrate. Same with white bread. But the way it's digested in our body is very different. So the low GI foods are going to be digested slowly. But again, if we eat a lot of that or too much of it, then that's just going to lead to weight gain because we're getting in a lot more calories. So I hope that answered your question. So yes, you really need to watch your portions, even if you are eating healthy food. The only one that you don't really need to watch your portions is when you're having raw vegetables. You can go crazy with those, but anything else, especially the grains, anything, you really need to be careful. Okay, excellent. So again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I don't think I wrote my email here, but it's just my first name, anar.allidina@gmail.com. Is a portion, okay. Sorry, I have another question. So this person really likes to eat chocolate. Is it possible that I can get diabetes soon? Really good question. Yeah, a lot of people feel like if they eat too many sweets, they could get diabetes. It depends. Is your weight at a healthy range? If you're overweight, then that absolutely can put you at a higher risk. Do you have a family health history of diabetes? If you do, that can definitely put you at a higher risk as well. And if you're eating a lot of chocolates and a lot of sweets, that means you're probably not eating enough of the healthier food. So, again, if you can definitely have like a small piece of chocolate every day. Again, it's the portion that you're having, but you need to make sure your meals are well balanced and that you're exercising and that your weight is a healthy weight. So that's what you really need to look at your entire meals to see how that is. But yes, if you do eat chocolate a lot and you're not really taking care of your meals, and if you have diabetes in your family, then absolutely that can put you at a higher risk. Okay, so what are some good cookies for people who have diabetes? I love cookies with tea as a snack. Yeah, so that's a tricky one because sometimes certain foods we have or certain beverages like tea, we associate that with having a treat with it or something sweet with it, right? Especially if you don't put any sugar in your tea, then you're like, oh, I need something with it. So this is a really tricky one. When you are buying cookies, you want to look at the nutrition facts panel, and this is something I didn't add in my presentation, which I wish I had. But when you're buying packaged goods, you want to make sure that you have some protein and fiber, and you want the sugar grams to be as low as possible. So just to give you a reference, you want sugar grams to be less than 7, and you want your protein and fiber to be at least 2 grams. So any kind of those arrowroot cookies or the unsweetened cookies, those would be a better choice than, the shortbread cookies, for example. And are dates okay for a sweet treat? Yes, they are. However, they still are a source of sugar, even though it's a natural sugar. So the portion for dates is 2 dates. So if you're having, 3 or 4, that's too much, and you need to reduce how much you're having. Because think about it, dried fruit, all the water has been evaporated, so you're left with a very concentrated amount of sugar. So if you are having dates, perhaps you may want to add, 2 dates with a handful of nuts, like almonds, to kind of pair that, so it will make it a more filling treat for you to have. I hope that makes sense. You don't want to have the dates on its own because it has a very high sugar amount. So you want to pair that protein with it. Any other questions? These are some really, really helpful questions that I'm sure everyone is benefiting from. So yes, even having too much fruit, that could be a problem as well, right? If you're having like 5 servings of fruit a day, that's a lot. So you really want to be careful. And there's certain fruits that are higher in glycemic index, such as bananas and grapes. And there are certain fruits that are lower in glycemic index, such as, berries, pears. So you want to make sure you're choosing the right amount of fruit as well. And you don't want to have more than 2 servings of fruit a day. All right. So I don't know if I have any more questions. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. And again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And inshallah, I'll talk to you soon. Enjoy your weekend, everyone. Khaddafis.